Hey folks, it's PatriotNurse, and in today's segment, I want to have a discussion with you guys about a pretty heavy topic, and it hasn't really been addressed, I think, with the appropriate amount of respect and pensiveness that the subject matter requires, and that is deciding who dies in a long-term disaster. Um, I have really tried to steer away from talking about this particular subject too much. Um, for one thing, I think that end of life decisions, right? End of life care, that sort of thing is already charged enough in the subject matter, right? People have very, very strongly and closely held convictions about these issues in particular, and that's okay. But I woke up this morning, and I'm actually filming this on a Saturday, and I don't normally film videos or work at all on Saturdays. That's my thing. But the first thing that I thought when I woke up this morning was the picture of a little girl from a National Geographic segment, really about the starving and hunger in Sudan. And it was just sort of like this instantaneous download, and I felt like I needed to talk about this with you guys. Okay. So let me give you a brief background as to where this is coming from. So a while back, I was on a radio show in which we were playing a particular game, if you will, regarding scenarios, potential scenarios we were confronted with and how we would deal with them in a grid down long-term disaster. And the particular scenario, I can't remember the ins and outs of it, but I was joined by 4 other people. And in the scenario, I think it was something like there's only X number amount of antibiotics, and the particular disease that is manifesting as bacterial in origin. And basically, we have the medicine to cure this disease. However, we don't have enough for everyone to get it. And there are 2 people in our group who are both sick. One of them is a disabled, mentally retarded child who has a twin who is not, and the other is a fully functioning, adult, a contributing member of our community who should get the drugs. And it was interesting because everybody except me in that particular circumstance. I'm not saying this from I'm so the bastion of all goodness and glory here. It's not where I'm coming from. Everyone in the group, with the exception of yours truly, said to give the medicine to the contributing member of the group, to the fully functioning adult. And I was the dissenting opinion that said, the adult has a decent chance, a better chance of kicking this particular disease, of being able to surmount an immunological defense to this disease versus this child who is not functioning, perhaps, where he or she needs to be. And when I woke up this morning and I had that image just pop into my head, it occurred to me, we need to talk about this as people, as a community, as a group, because there is a lot of intellectual circle jerk going on as to who gets to make decisions regarding who dies in long-term disasters. And to be honest, I think that there is a lot of ill-founded, elitist, cavalier attitude towards supervising the death of people who are undesirable or who are non-contributing members. And I think we need to really have a frank discussion about what the parameters are if we're involved in a decision like that. Lord willing, we will not be in a situation like that for a good long, long time to come, hopefully never. But if we are faced as a people with making very difficult decisions like that, I think that there's a few things that need to happen ahead of time, right? When you're looking at being confronted with who gets a limited amount of supplies quandary, I think we need to have had a discussion ahead of time about these sorts of things. So, for instance, a practical step here that we could take in our groups, and I think it has to happen here, is having the discussion with your family members ahead of time of, okay, in this situation, would you want to live or die? For instance, let's say that we were in a complete breakdown where there is no rule of law anymore, God forbid, and the person in your care had sustained a life-threatening injury, perhaps a traumatic injury secondary to a gunshot wound, that no amount of suturing could fix. Because this is the thing, just because you can get a bullet out, and just because you can close that wound, that doesn't mean that your job is done. We're looking at risk for infection here and possible sepsis and the person dying a long, prolonged death versus one from, for instance, exsanguination or bleeding out, something like that. Okay. We need to have the conversations ahead of time with our families about these sorts of things. Okay. And I get this question a lot in class. This is a pretty somber video, by the way, if you can't tell. Um, Making decisions like that, first off, I come from the school of thought that I don't think that it is reasonable for a human being outside of extreme circumstances to assume the powers of choosing life and death for the desirables versus the undesirables of the community, the productive and non-productive members. So where is the whole National Geographic picture coming into this, and where is the whole PatriotNurse playing the survival, choosing who's living and dying game? I'll start with I'll finish, I guess, my point with the game that I was playing. My contention and my rationale was not solely based on this healthy adult, given a limited amount of medical supplies, that this healthy adult, strictly from a physiological standpoint, could kick this disease, and it would be a better utilization of resources to allocate it for this disabled child versus the otherwise healthy adult. That's only part of the equation. Let's look at the second part of the equation, which is the long-term impacts of having to live with the consequences of making choices like that. If, for instance, we neglected to take care of this child who is vulnerable, who has no other advocate, who cannot be a self-advocate in this case, in this particular case, the consequences of allowing this person to die, they don't end whenever you bury them, right? Human beings have to live with this. And I'm not even saying this from this is a conjecture, this is a hypothetical thing. There is solid history behind these sorts of things. Let me fast forward to the National Geographic story. Okay. There's a picture, and I have it right down here. I brought the particular article up. I'm going to put a link in the description box below to this particular article. It was published in 2006 by the Chicago Tribune. The title of this is The Death of Kevin Carter and One Indelible Image. Kevin Carter was the photographer who captured the image that really stuck in a lot of people's minds back during the famine that was sweeping much of North Africa back in the 90s. And he was in Sudan on assignment when he captured this picture of this little girl who was emaciated, starving, and inching her way to a feeding station. One of the masses of people whom history had chosen as unfit to survive. And there are many different stories as to what ultimately brought about this man's suicide. This particular photographer who took his life after the death of a friend. But many people had hypothesized that it was the impacts of witnessing things that he did and not intervening and doing anything about it. I mean, actually, the article alludes to Mr. Carter's having to capture this image, his internal drive to, as a photographer, as his job, as his role would dictate, to capture this image of this emaciated little girl and not intervene to do anything about it. And here she was, just inching and crawling, if somebody would pick her up and take her to a feeding station. And he recalls, per the article later in his life, that the subjects of his work were all dead. And I think we need to really bite that off and chew on it and digest it a little bit. A healthy dose of reality into the situation. Guys, I recognize that there is much entertainment with some of the fantastical scenarios that are put up on TV with the regular shows that come out each week. But may I submit to you that history is a far better teacher than anything that could be put up on the screen right now, fantasy-wise. The stories of people who have had to live with themselves, and honestly, who didn't live with themselves after having to make decisions of life and death for another person, I think that speaks to the gravity and the weight of this particular issue, and that we shouldn't be cavalier with it. It's one thing to look at things, and I've made videos about this. I've made the classic video, "Who will die first when the shit hits the fan?" I've made videos about this, but I think people tend to confuse the cold hard facts of the issue with the long-term emotional, mental, and moral ramifications of the choices that we could potentially be in. And I don't relish those choices. I don't think we should relish those choices. I think, if anything, that we should be looking now anticipatorily to refining our character, really going over our moral fibers with some fine grit sandpaper, right? The time to practice your moral fortitude is not in a situation where it is tested. Having it built up way ahead of time, that's going to serve you better. And really, I just wanted to share my thoughts with you on that, because these decisions are difficult now. Life and death, long-term care decisions, these are difficult things now. How much more so in a disaster? How much more so in a situation where we're looking at having all of our givens pulled out from under us, right? So have the conversations with your family, and these are not easy conversations. A lot of people don't like talking about this sort of stuff. Have them ahead of time. Have them now as to what your wishes are, right? Do you want to wait and linger in the event of, a catastrophic injury? Which is fine. I think that we have to have an honest conversation here and to respect people's wishes as best as possible. But I think the take-home points here are today. So number one, treat the issue with the respect and the gravity that it deserves. And then number two, have these honest and open conversations. They are difficult conversations, but have them with the people in your groups and with the people that you love. And if you really want to be squared away about this, having a living will is good now anyway for medical decisions, but also thinking ahead to long-term disaster. If you're looking at really being squared away with your group, making sure that your wishes are known within the context of the group is also a good thing. So I hope that was helpful for y'all today. Now, this is a quite sober coffee talk. By the way, I had some questions about this. People wanted to know what it is. This is a Mubad double wall insulated coffee mug, and it keeps my coffee really warm. I'll put a link down in the description box below. I know you guys are wanting to be getting stuff for the holidays, getting presents for people. This is awesome. I actually got it as a present from my parents a while back, but it keeps the coffee, whatever beverage of choice, very, very warm. I love it. I'll put a link down there for you guys. I hope today's video was helpful for y'all. If you enjoyed the video today, please subscribe to me, like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. Also, check out the full course schedule for our 2015 classes, thepatriotnurse.com on the classes page. We've got 101 and 201 all around the country. So check it out, and I hope to see you guys there. Hope it was helpful for y'all. And for now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.